Awesome. Thank you so much for having us. I'll kick things off. My name is Rowan Ward. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the chapter engagement coordinator for the Midwest for PFLAG National. So I'm really our liaison person between all of our Midwest chapters. There's more than 100 Midwest chapters and national with all the resources and everything. So I'd love to start just a little bit about PFLAG, who we are, and we'll talk a little bit later about how to get started. So PFLAG, what is it? PFLAG originally was parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays. Now we're just PFLAG. PFLAG just stands for really just an inclusive community of people who are there to support the LGBTQ community. We have chapters that have parents, we have LGBTQ members, we have allies. So our chapters and chapter meetings really just constitute a whole bunch of different people. It was started in 1973 by Jean Manford. That means we were celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, which is very exciting. Jean is an amazing human being. You can see her in our slides here, and she was someone who really just wanted to come out and support her gay son in a time when coming out and being supportive was hard. And so she was someone who marched in parades with her son and really became a huge advocate for the LGBTQ community. So she's kind of our leading light when we talk about things. Our tagline is leading with love, but we also talk about leading like Jean. So she's really kind of our guiding light. Our mission is to support, educate, and advocate. We have 350 chapters across the United States with 350,000 members, which is really, really incredible how it all grew, especially just from one person. Our chapters provide peer support, education, and advocacy to LGBTQ people, their families, and allies. What that looks like is oftentimes a support meeting. Those support meetings can talk about a wide range of things. It can talk about your kid who's just coming out. It's a space for LGBTQ people to talk about their family relationships or experiences they're having in the community. It's also a space for allies to learn. That's the education piece. So our chapters offer just a whole wide array of programming. It can be about the history of LGBTQ people. It can get into, trans identities. What are they? How do we talk about them? It could be, what does our legislation look like? The education is really there for the entire community to learn more about LGBTQ people. And then the advocacy range is something that we are just seeing grow a ton. Unfortunately, it is more relevant now than ever, as we see in a lot of states across the country more anti-LGBTQ legislation. So PFLAG also becomes a hub for LGBTQ people and their allies and friends and family to step up and fight for the rights of everyone, really. And that can be as wide as going to the state house. We've had chapters do that, and as small as advocating at your local school board, which we see a lot of. So why PFLAG? Before I get into that, are there questions on just the kind of about PFLAG?
Just want to remind people that this, if you'd like to ask a question that could be anonymous, you can message me directly and I will read it off. So there's lots of room for this to be an open conversation, but also understand things might come up there, not ones you want to have it associated with you at this moment.
Thanks for that, Kelsey. So the benefits of starting a PFLAG chapter, there's a ton of benefits to being part of the PFLAG family. All of our chapter members are national members, and they receive all the benefits of being a part of that network. Oftentimes, our PFLAG chapters are the first and sometimes the only LGBTQ organization in the area. And folks who are really excited to do that might want to start off and kind of do as much as they possibly can. And it can be really, really hard to start a nonprofit from scratch. And so being a part of PFLAG means that you get a lot of just resources and help in doing that. Those resources look like swag packs, design software, templates. If other chapters are doing it, we can share it with you so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel on a lot of things. There's also support from National. I'm here all the time. I answer people's questions. Easy, complicated, we're here to help. We also have a ton of learning resources, from everything to pronouns, to telling your story, to how do I do design work. We really have a lot of really great resources for learning how to do a chapter. We also have shared talking points, which can be super, super helpful when you're in the community, say at a school board meeting, and you want to speak in front of people. Doing that can be really scary and really difficult, especially if you have people who maybe aren't as LGBTQ friendly. And so we can help coach you through how to do that, how to write an op-ed, what that language looks like, which is a really helpful resource for folks. You also have the ability to connect with chapters regionally. So that way it's not just you in your place, but you can talk to all of Minnesota, all of the Midwest. You can kind of get the perspective of other chapters as well, which is wonderful. The nitty gritty is also that it makes tax exemption status easy and cheaper. Again, starting a nonprofit is difficult, and you will come under the PFLAG National Nonprofit status, which is a perk. There's some corporate sponsor incentives, and there's also protection from lawsuits. It's something that unfortunately we are talking about now more, but PFLAG is currently suing Texas and the governor there, Governor Abbott, and we were interjecting on their child services coming in and investigating parents. Really awful thing, but it means that under that lawsuit, all of the PFLAG chapter members in Texas are protected. So if you see sort of actions being taken and if PFLAG steps in, that means that chapter members are protected from that sort of thing, which is a really helpful benefit, especially for a lot of our parents in more legislatively challenged areas. Questions on that?
Yeah, as if you're thinking about creating something, say in our area,
Mhm.
do you sort of have like a starter concept of like, this is the things that you might want to be doing if you were creating a chapter, and like, this is how you get the word out. This is what example of a Facebook page might look like. This is what example of a flyer might be, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a whole sort of process that we walk people through. And so you will come to one of our affiliation meetings and we walk you through the whole thing from start to finish, which also means like, hey, here's how you organize and here's how you help people and get the word out. But it usually starts with a core group of people who want to get involved, and then they spread the word from there. And Phil might be able to talk a little bit more about how Mora area got started in this way too.
Yeah. Let's see, how can I say it? Well, I'll just a quick history, because our relationship with PFLAG was really important, because it also got us connected with other like-minded people, like you mentioned. So we started our PFLAG group back in 2008. So Rowan, to tell you the truth, I can hardly remember how we got started with the paperwork and the PFLAG, the PFLAG stuff. But basically we started out with, I had at that time, right now I have an adult transgender daughter. And going back to 2008, she was a young boy who was coming out as gay and came out to my wife and myself. And just from my experience, for some reason, I knew what PFLAG was or heard something about PFLAG. So that was the first place we went. And about probably less than a month later, maybe a couple months later, a woman from, we incorporated and started out in Mora, Minnesota. So we're officially the PFLAG Mora chapter. But she came up to me one day we were at an event, and she was active in DFL politics, and just said, "You have a gay son, right?" I go, "Yeah." She said, "You like to start a PFLAG chapter?" I said, "Sure. What do we do, or who do you think?" And she goes, "Well, I have a couple people in mind, but do you have anybody?" And so we really didn't. We were totally isolated, and like you said, we were the only LGBT, there were no other LGBTQ organizations, visible ones. There were some later we found out were kind of not hiding out, but riding below the radar. They're a little afraid to come out in those days in our rural area. And I remember my wife going, I think I was at work, and she called me and said, you know, I went out to the PFLAG website and I punched in our address. And we live outside of Moore in a town called Ogilvie. It's about 200 people. And she goes, my God, there's a couple from Ogilvie that are PFLAG members. And she called them up, the Thorns Guards. Never forget that. Who would have thunk that off the PFLAG website, you'd connect with some people that were about 10 miles down the road with like interests and everything. And their kid, let's say they had a son who is now just graduating from college, and they knew another couple. And then we found out about one of the LGBT groups in the area that was kind of riding below the radar was called Men's Circle. And they had started meeting a couple of years earlier as just kind of a private organization for LGBTQ men in the region, that as a social group, just so they had some connection and didn't feel so isolated. 3 of those men joined as soon as we contacted them, said, yeah, I'm aboard. And so we started out our first meeting at a church of all places. And maybe we can talk a little bit, Rowan, about the religious aspect that comes up a lot. But we found one woman organizer who started the idea. She belonged to this church that was very open-minded, gave us a space to meet. So we started out with, let's say, my wife and myself as a couple, 2 other couples that had kids, 3 gay men, and 2 allies. And there we went. And we just talked about what we were thinking and what we were doing, and looked at the PFLAG support and how we could take advantage of that. And away we went. And we didn't look at how to form a group or what to do. We just like, okay, here we go. What should we do first? And then we started planning our first thing we did was got a website up, an email, that sort of thing, got some social media going. And we planned our first event, and away we went. And we've been going ever since. So 7 people came together with the same idea, all with very much shared or different experiences, parents, older LGBTQ people, just plain allies. So interesting group, and away we went. So that's how we got going.
Bill, would you talk at all about maybe the differences of starting out to maybe where you are now, what the group sizes, or like where people are traveling from, if you're meeting via Zoom, you know, what things you guys maybe have put on, or what kind of, what does that look like as it's operated?
But right now, we started out with monthly meetings, and started out in this church in Mora, and just got the word out. We did our first event probably, I remember we met in July, and then that was in July, and worked on our PFLAG stuff. And we did our first event in the fall, and the church really took a risk, because literally there was no LGBTQ discussion at all or visibility at all in Mora, Minnesota back then. And we screened a movie. It was called And So the Bible Tells You So. And it was a movie about parents and their kids, and the struggle between the parents' religious beliefs and their gay kid who was not welcomed by their church or religion. And it profiled 3 couples, and some took the side of their kids. One couple couldn't do it. And so it was real moving. Plus, one of the couples that was featured in the movie lived in Minneapolis. And again, these are how these connections happen. Someone knew someone who knew someone else who knew those people, and invited them to come up to Mora. And so we screened this movie and had an open discussion. And we had 40 people show up. And we were dumbfounded. We thought, if we get a dozen, we'll be happy. And so the 40 people that came up were purely word of mouth. And so that's kind of how we got started with programming. And I think the thing that has always guided us is the mission statement. And PFLAG's involved with three areas: advocacy, education, and what's the third one, Rowan? Advocacy, education,
Support.
Support. Of course, that's the main thing. Support. So we've always worked in those arenas. So support is our monthly meetings and any information we can get out, any way we can do outreach to parents, kids, or whatever. And again, we meet monthly. We have a core group of about 5, 6 of us that are there religiously. And then we have people that come in and come out, and some that stay as members for a long time. But we have probably 4 of our core founders still active. And then when we have interesting topics or different, whatever reason there is, we'll have maybe a dozen people, 15 people. And when we screen movies, do open discussions like that, educational programs, usually 30 show up somewhere around, and that seems to be our number. And yeah, and over the years, we've screened movies. I just got a laundry list of stuff. We've done presentations, we've done in-service for high school teachers. We did training for police and sheriff's office about gender identity and proper pronouns. We've done transgender 101. We've done several things on gender identity and those sort of things. Oh man, then advocacy wise, we're very active in the marriage amendment. And again, that's where you go with partnering. By then, our Pride organization was up and running, pretty active. A DFL, one of the county DFLs, sort of adopted PFLAG as a way to support the whole concept of LGBTQ. They tied us in then with some legislative lobbying and presentations. And so we probably spent 2010, 2011, 2012 all working on the marriage amendment. And then when that passed, we were the ones that had a celebratory banquet at one of the restaurants. And in fact, you know, it was at the Grant House, Rowan, in Rush City. We had a big celebratory, and we just, the whole restaurant was covered with pride flags. And so that was a major advocacy point. And now it's transgender. We were at Trans Joy Fest last week in Duluth, active with Transgender Day of Visibility, just where we go wherever someone asks us or we think we want a presence. So does that help? Or
Well, it's great. And
I don't want to go on and on and on and on, but
no, I'm sure
you know,
we're gonna have more follow-up questions. I
I was
suppose
just going to say, you kind of go where your members take you and have connections. And just like this presentation, out of the blue, you call me up and say, do you want to do this? Yeah, sure. Okay. We're always, our members, myself, we're always willing to spread the message. So.
Well, I love that. Ron, would you like to tell us more about chapter responsibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the question is getting started. And so I really like to remind people that starting a PFLAG chapter is also starting a nonprofit organization, which is a big undertaking, but also a really exciting one. It's a great way to build, like Phil and I've been saying, connection, support, education, and advocacy in a local area. You're talking about like, well, how do you even get started? How do you find these people? And I love Phil's story of just like, well, we kind of talked about this, and then these 3 people came around. I really think that that is still what happens. You start to get the word that a PFLAG chapter is forming, and suddenly you have a room full of 10, 15 people who all are there for their own reasons to get interested and get excited. The entire process these days takes about 3 to 6 months to complete. The average volunteer dedicates around 20 hours per month to starting and running a chapter. And I would say those are the folks who are part of the board, who are kind of most involved in the day-to-day activities. So it is a lot of responsibility and work to have a running chapter, but it's also extremely rewarding. It's just something we like to talk about so that folks kind of know what it is that they're stepping into. The cool thing though is that we've got a lot of different ways that people can get involved. People can take on a board role and do something like Phil does and run the chapter. But there's also different ways. If someone is, say, like very good at marketing and that's what they want to do, there's spaces for people to just bring what they're good at. And also just, gosh, chapters always need volunteers. And so there's really levels for however you want to get involved in a chapter, you can. So really the process is you fill out our interest form. I can show that in the chat, and Kelsey, I can send that your way as well. And then you attend one of our orientation sessions. You can attend even if you're not ready to start. If you're just saying like, we've got 3 people, we're unsure if we want to do this, that's totally fine. We go over everything you need to know before finalizing your decision. So we talk about PFLAG, we talk about what you do, we talk about the entire process, start to finish. And we have a lot of resources at this point to help you go through that entire process. But if you go to that meeting and you're like, I don't think it's for me, that's totally fine. The orientation is really just a great way to kind of know what it is you're getting into.
Can you tell me if that's offered regularly? Is it by a group? How does that happen?
Yeah, gosh, I think we have an orientation session every 2 weeks. So it's really easy to kind of get in and get interested in that sort of thing.
And I'm assuming that's on Zoom or some version of that.
Yes, it is. And you'll be on a call with folks across the country, which I always think is kind of cool. We start the orientation meetings by just sharing your name, pronouns, and why you're here, why you're interested in PFLAG. So you get to like hear, 10 to 15 people's different reasons for being there. And that's always kind of my favorite part of attending the orientation sessions, because everyone's got a story and everyone's there for a different reason, which is very, very cool in my opinion. From there, you'll start kind of doing the organizing. That looks like setting up an email, going through internal documents, creating a social network page like Facebook, making a logo. Luckily, we've got a ton of resources for doing that whole process, and we walk you through every step of the way. Internal documents are really wild and a difficult thing to do, but we've got templates. I will sit on a call with you and we'll go through everything. We have a logo maker. It's all really, really great. And things that we don't have, our other chapters have done before. So, you can reach out to Phil and say, hey, Phil, how do we do this? Have you done this before? And Phil can send you what he has, which is a really nice perk. The big thing is that you need 3 core people. Our structure is that you have a president, treasurer, and secretary, and those are the board roles that you need to have to form a chapter. So having 3 core people is really important. We're big advocates for it being really a community organization and a community group. And so working together so that not just one person is doing all the work is really important to us. From there, you'll establish a chapter name, and then it's state and IRS filing. Again, we help you with all the paperwork, all of doing that, and help people get through that level. And from there, you're a chapter, and you get to start doing support meetings and planning all the cool stuff that Phil was talking about. And the support doesn't end once you're started either. We have all of the support you need to host different events and host your support meeting and lots of trainings on all of that.
Yeah. Feel free. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say something because I know your group, you talked about the idea of whether, and don't kill me for saying this wrong, but if you don't want to become a PFLAG chapter, I think a good example is in Duluth, they used to have a PFLAG chapter, and it kind of dissolved and which happens, people just fades away. But then what sprung out of that was a group called Northland Allies, which is really a strong group of moms really who advocate and do a lot like PFLAG. But I think if you're interested in support and you want to help kids and you want to reach out to families, being part of PFLAG really makes that connection. In other words, we get phone calls and emails from kids and parents from all over, and they never would have found us without a connection to PFLAG. So when you are just a LGBTQ group, and you know, and like we're a part of a couple others, and we're a big part of our East Central Minnesota Pride, but the PFLAG part really adds the connection to really be a helper in your community, if that makes sense. It makes a big difference.
No, thanks for saying that, Phil. I know that one of the reasons we were excited, especially to bring you in, is that after doing our presentations last year, we had a lot of education trainings, but families had questions, and we were trying to find places that they could individually go and have some support that, you know, I could put on another workshop, but that doesn't solve the individual relationship building and connections of
Right,
conversation and shared experience creation.
right.
And
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this sort of thing is an option for that.
In fact, you know, when you ask about our meetings, and this is why PFLAG, you know, it sounds kind of complicated, like it's a hard thing to do. It isn't onerous at all. But our meetings, our agenda is, we start out with sharing discussion, period. And when we set our agenda, we set our schedule, it's always an hour and a half, 2 hours max, just depending on what people bring and want to talk about. And so our agendas are sharing and discussion. So anybody that comes can bring whatever they want to bring, and we all just talk and do support. When we finally run out of talking, we do our treasurer's report, or approve our minutes from last week. We do 3 business items that take really hardly anything. And then if we're planning events or whatever, you know, then we go into coordinating projects and that sort of thing. But that's it. It's support, and for those people to come. We've had people. We had a woman just a couple of months ago that came from outside our region because she couldn't find any other contact. She wouldn't give us her name other than her first name, where she lived, where she is from, but she needed help with her kids. She didn't know what to do. And I think from discussion, it appeared one of her daughters might have been transgender. But she came, she stayed totally anonymous, was able to, we have a transgender, an older retired transgender woman on our board, and she provided a lot of help. She got a lot out of that meeting. And when I asked her for contact information, that sort of thing, and put her on her email list and stuff, she said, no, thank you anyway. I learned tremendous amount, but right now I don't want to commit to anything, and I just as soon keep it quiet. And now I haven't seen or heard from her since. And we've had other people that have come to a couple of meetings, and they've been on our group ever since. They've been, you know, so people come and go with a lot of different needs and a lot of different questions. And that's what it is, just a place to come talk about whatever has to do with LGBTQ issues.
I think that's especially, I guess, special for, I mean, we're in a rural area, things are small. Sometimes things seem like it's much more a fishbowl, and maybe it is sometimes, very much so. And that there's our larger places where you can be more anonymous, and that it can be hard in our regions. So that's just why it's especially helpful to have another rural area talking about how this flows for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's when you mentioned that article they did about me and my wife, that pretty well blew any cover we might have had, or trying to work below the radar. Most people know how to seek us out, but that put us front and center. And I'll tell you another thing, the response you get, even in this environment where some of our events are, you're a little worried about security and different things nowadays than you did before, overwhelmingly positive. Every presentation we've ever done, anytime we've partnered with people on anything LGBTQ related, there's so many people that are not hiding out, but not very visible and don't know if they want to be visible. And it gives them a crack to talk to somebody and to come forward. And that's, yeah, that's a really a big deal for a lot of people and families.
And being that you work with a variety of different areas, I guess, in Minnesota, could you tell me a little about what other ones exist in Minnesota, what that looks like for PFLAG in our state?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I was very excited about this meeting happening because Minnesota doesn't have as many chapters as some of our other Midwestern states. So the idea that we could see more chapters grow would be really cool. Right now we have still in PFLAG Mara area. Then we have technically Wisconsin, but they share kind of Minnesota area, which is River Falls. They've got folks who attend both from Minnesota and also in Wisconsin. There's one just south of Minneapolis in New Prague. We've got a really, really vibrant chapter, another more rural chapter over in Marshall on the kind of west side of the state. And then we have kind of another split between over in Grand Forks, which is in kind of the north west area, and that's kind of a split between Dakota and Minnesota, but you see some of these border areas. But outside of that, those are kind of the chapters in Minnesota. So having something, especially in the more northern region, would be very exciting for me personally. I will say it is cool though, because there are chapters in kind of different areas of the state. We really, when we have like our regional meetings, get to hear about kind of how things are different, what people might be doing in a city versus a rural area that you can take. And gosh, our cities learn a lot from our rural areas as well. There's really successful chapters in all sorts of different areas. And Minnesota has suburban, rural, urban locations. And so there's a real opportunity to learn from everyone in the state.
Are there conferences when everybody comes together? Are there, what does it look like? Is that all one city? Is that Zoom? How do people connect with other chapters or come together?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. We are working on having kind of regional area meetups when we can, as well as kind of state meetups. So that's something that we're growing coming out of kind of COVID times and looking at what we want to do. So we do have some state meetups that we're working on planning. We have regional meetings every single month. So Minnesota's in the region with Wisconsin and the Dakotas as well. And so those are on Zoom, where you have the opportunity to just chat with everyone in the region, chat with us and our regional directors. And it's really just a sharing session, but then we'll also do kind of presentations. We're planning things right now on how to do media, as well as some grant writing coming up. So it's an opportunity to learn, but also just hear about what everyone else is doing. And then every other year, including this year, we do have a national convention, which means that everyone from across the United States, all the PFLAG chapters can come. This year it is in DC. We've got some folks traveling. We'll be traveling down to DC, and it's really, really cool. There's a lobby day at the Capitol where folks can talk to their legislators, and our team helps plan all of that. There's workshops, sessions, you get to meet and chat with everybody in person, and it's really just an opportunity to kind of learn from everyone and each other and connect. We're all kind of doing something that is unique, and being in a room with other PFLAGers is a really fun time. So that's coming up in October, actually. We offer scholarships as well for our chapters and chapter members to attend, that sort of thing. So it makes it a little bit easier to get down to DC.
Yeah, I know when we first started out, I know a couple of our members went down to Decorah, Iowa. You had a regional conference there of some sort. And I know that really helped. They brought back a lot of stuff, and that added a lot, got us going. I'll mention one thing too, if about different kind of chapters. Our chapter started out as kind of the traditional PFLAG geared towards parents a lot. But it's the kids. We can talk about our scholarship program maybe a little bit later here, but kids, their parents want a connection for their kids. We get a lot of parents that go, where can my 14-year-old transgender son meet up with some like-minded kids his age or her age or whatever it is, those kind of connections. So what I find, so ours is much more traditional, and we do education programming and presentations and all that. But the Marshall, Minnesota group, they kind of run, I like to think of them as my kids were in 4-H. So they do kind of like family activities. So they'll have like all the families with their kids will then meet at a bowling alley on a Saturday and have this collective activity. And then the next month might be the kids and the parents are going to go meet at some other activity sort of thing. And then I think, I'm not 100% positive because I've not talked to their director, but I believe then they also take some time for the parents to just grab a cup of coffee and talk away from the kids for a little bit. And so I kind of like that model. That's really, right now, they really meet a high need area of connecting kids. St. Cloud's Pride organization does that as well. They hold these events for kids and their allies and parents to show up at different venues and just to, again, be with like-minded people. So.
Phil, I have kind of a follow-up question about that. I don't think there's any competition for more support for everybody, but we have a pretty our newly founded pretty active Pride committee that is doing some great work. Why would they find PFLAG to be the alternative, or is that just an additional? How does that look for places that are looking to operate, but maybe the same people would be part of everything if they're looking at too?
That's us. we're half of us are also on our Pride board, and also in our region, in all 5 counties altogether, there's our PFLAG group, our East Central Minnesota Pride group, the original group called Men's Circle. And then there's another women's group that formed called Purple Circle. And so it's my number one recommendation to everybody is you all have to be aligned. You all have to do the same work. You don't want to replace Pride or PFLAG. Pride is one thing and does this, and then PFLAG has got another mission, but they should both work together. In other words, our Pride group supports our PFLAG events. Like I said, word of mouth is what really markets most of everything. And their social media reach helps us. We help Pride. We provide people and work and been members of Pride since, well, probably going on 10 years now. And then again, a representative from Purple Circle is on our board, and at least one man from Men's Circle is still on our board. So whenever anybody's doing any work for the LGBTQ community, everyone knows about it. So I think when you find active people that want to be in the LGBTQ community, they're gonna be in all the committees. I'm sorry, but especially in a small town, seems to be how that works. But that connection is helps so much. But I know you're so, the fact you already have Pride up and running and you have some visibility is a great position to be in. And to take that, whatever you think the next step might be.
We also, I'll say, include that in our kind of forming as one of the steps that we ask us to take, is to really do kind of an assessment of the community and say, like, what are other people offering, right? It might be that there's a Pride organization that's really got the community building aspect covered, but they don't have support or advocacy. Great, that's the space that PFLAG can fill. We have other places where there's an LGBTQ center. They've got the education on lock. Our PFLAG chapters maybe don't need to focus on that so much, but they can help with the support and advocacy space of it. So we kind of have that built in as you're starting a chapter to see where the space is for PFLAG. And also, as Phil's saying, that coalition building and just working together with everyone in the community is a huge part of starting anything like this.
Do you have a tool at all that people would be able to use to assess first before they would decide if they even felt like PFLAG was the choice they wanted to continue moving down or even start moving to consider?
That's a great question.
Like realizing what you're talking about, but it being something they could use proactively before they would maybe start the next step.
Yeah, I don't know if we have kind of a work activity page like that. I think it really just comes down to who's in the area and can you start a conversation with them.
I just find that with even in our and other forums and areas, we're always trying to assess, like, are we just duplicating actions, or is this something that needs to be created? Like, there's always that, and especially because we are rural, like we might think something is being met, but maybe it's not actually being met at all because they're a population that can't reach us, or it's it's an assumption that it's accessible or something.
Absolutely. And I will also say, like, you can attend the orientation session and have those conversations. There's really kind of no commitment to attending, finding out more, and you might come to the session and say like, oh no, I think this organization in town is covering this and this isn't for us. So I think that initial session can really help folks get connected with our resources and what they want to do.
Well, thinking about you, Ryan, a little bit, what are some of the things that you really like about working within PFLAG, or that you think are sort of the highlights of organizational impact?
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, I think my favorite part of PFLAG is just the kind of diversity of folks that show up. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and I've been in different LGBTQ spaces before, and I don't see the same kind of intergenerational diversity when I'm in the kind of other spaces, or interfaith diversity. I've been to chapters where there are teenagers, there's young adults, there's people who are parents, and then there's folks who are maybe older, retired, all in the same meeting, all talking to each other about different things and sharing perspective. I've been in meetings before where there are 3 or 4 different people of different faith backgrounds sharing their story and how their connection with faith has affected their understanding of LGBTQ communities. And sometimes those folks are LGBTQ people, and sometimes they're parents, and sometimes they're both. And that sort of kind of community support and storytelling, I feel is special to PFLAG, and it brings me a lot of joy to see it. I also just love the sheer joy of the space. The space is really just accepting of everyone, and I feel like there are stories told and people get to be themselves in a way that I don't always see in other places. Gosh, I was at East Central Minnesota Pride the other weekend. I went to go visit Phil, and I was meeting chapter members who had just come out as trans like 3 or 4 years ago, and telling their stories and saying like, here's who I am, here's why I exist. And some of these folks were in their 60s or 70s. And for me, as a younger trans person, I love hearing that. I love seeing someone who is on their journey and finding a place where they can connect and speak in a way that isn't maybe the traditional or kind of media focused story. I think there's a lot of focus on, at least in the trans community, that it's all these young folks are discovering this, and there's a bunch of folks who have a different story than that. You get to access that through PFLAG. That's kind of what I find really special.
Yeah, I was going to say that looking at so many of the different websites out there of different PFLAG groups, you can see there's so much different ways it could be applied, right? Like there's ones that were clearly educational branches that were going out and presenting all over the place. And then there was other groups that were much more internal and just looking for more support of loved ones and people within their niche. And then other ones that are way more, Phil, you're serving a whole region. And in many ways, maybe beyond, you're serving us right now, maybe in some ways serving a whole state when there's lesser PFLAG chapters. So it is just, it can look very different. And some
Yep.
states are very active with lots of chapters in, neighboring areas, which I can't even imagine what that sort of allyship looks like, to just be able to have chapters after chapters in your region. One of the questions I just saw come up in the chat is, how many people do you need for minimum? I think you said 3. Is that correct?
Yep, 3 is the minimum. I think oftentimes there's a core group of, I'd say 3 at minimum, 10 at maximum, of like a very core group of organizing people. I think if you get outside of that, it can be a little bit difficult to just kind of manage starting. I think 5 is oftentimes the sweet spot. You've got 3 people who can take the president, treasurer, secretary role, and then 2 folks who can maybe focus on some of the different pieces of it. That's kind of, I think, the sweet spot, but 3 is the minimum.
And could you tell me, like, I mean, it sounds like there's some structure within that. Do they have to report back to you? Is that, I mean, are they have to report back to a larger, to the national chapters? Like, how does that work? Is it what you're doing here is fine, you're good, or is it there more to it?
Probably a little bit of both. PFLAG started as a grassroots organization, and even 50 years in, there's still a lot of grassroots in our whole structure. So there is reporting. Annually, folks have to report back just like tax information, IRS information, and kind of report back membership, just saying like, hey, here's our list of members. There are dues back to national, but it's a pretty low amount, and we walk chapters through like setting that and what that can look like. But outside of that, that's really kind of it on the requirements. We don't at national really want to get too much in the way of chapters doing chapter stuff. The way we really want to be there is to support folks and to help them through what their needs are, and less like, okay, follow the checklist of things that we need from you. So outside of kind of more governmental, just tax stuff, we don't have a lot of reporting back.
Bill, thinking about it for your perspective, he just mentioned dues, you mentioned scholarships before. That's kind of comes into a money game of things. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that looks like for your area? Or
Yeah,
what scholarships meant when you said it?
Yeah, fundraising is, we got together, our first group, and when we were talking about that event planning or whatever, we had no money. I think we all chipped in $20 was where we started. We had a garage sale, and I think we raised about $400, and then that was our seed money to get going. And it's really, I guess when I think about fundraising and money, money's never really been an issue. I think our membership dues is only $15, so that isn't an issue. Plus, PFLAG doesn't hound you for the money either. If we're pretty low key about collecting even $15 from people. But I think let's see, I think it was 2016. We're really kind of struggling about what's our role in helping kids. We just didn't know what to do. And so with some discussion, we came up with the idea of giving, LGBTQ kids sometimes aren't the most successful in school. Sometimes they have a lot of issues in school. It's in our rural area, it's tough. So we came up with the idea to raise up some money and to give scholarships to the LGBTQ seniors in the high schools that are in our region. And so that really helped in a couple of different ways. Number one is whenever we did a presentation and we said we give out scholarships, people gave us money. Oh, is that what you do? I want to help. So we weren't raising money for ourselves or for our group. Every penny we raise is for scholarships. And so that's kind of how we started accumulating money. But accumulating money means right now, I believe we give out $500 scholarships. And this last year we gave out 5. So out of our $4,000 budget, we gave away $2,500 in one fell swoop. Well, then we worked like, hopefully we can get back up to $4,000 again by next year. And we fundraise. We used to have a popcorn wagon and sell popcorn as we went to educational and community events. Now we sell wreaths. We have a LGBTQ artist that lives in Deer River that makes these unbelievable, gorgeous Christmas wreaths, and we sell them. And we sold a bunch at Pride in June for next Christmas. So, and our scholarship program, we started talking about it, and we would just have at our booth a big can that said scholarship fund, and we'd sell a box of popcorn. Somebody would give us some extra change in it. I forget the event. I think it was an arts event in Cambridge, and we had our table there. Guy came up and started talking to us, a man, older gentleman, started talking to us about scholarships and what we did and this and that. He went back to his car, got his checkbook and wrote us a check for $500, came back to our booth and said, here's a scholarship. And that was our first scholarship we gave at Cambridge High School. And that's how it happens. People, they want to support it somehow, and some people do it with money, but it certainly doesn't take a lot of money. You can do lots of, well, doing your pride, you do it on the skin of your teeth. And so the money has come in for the most part towards our scholarships. We've got little bits of money from Walmart and Target and some donated stuff here and there. Your electrical co-op is a good source for some money for programming, but fundraising and money and budgets isn't been our big issue at all, really. It's a pretty cheap organization to belong to as far as PFLAG goes. You get a lot for your money. I'll tell you, the swag stuff we had, that can get expensive. People like merch. And this year, PFLAG provided us with 2 box loads of Pride-related merchandise, plus a new table. I mean, we go on, we get the tablecloth at the dollar store, the plastic tablecloth that we tape down and put a flag on top of it. Well, now we have an actual official PFLAG Mora chapter tablecloth, So all sorts of little pieces here that come in and are well appreciated and come in handy.
Well, it's great to hear about all the ways you're making things work for your community, and what a creative solution to do scholarships. That's really a unique idea, especially appreciated in our neck of the woods when we work in education here.
Let me tell you,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I got to tell you this.
Though.
Oh, because this I could see this happen very easily in Grand Marais. This was a while back when we had our first scholarship. So literally we had to come out as a LGBTQ organization, PFLAG, into the community up on stage with all the other scholarship donors to give a girl in public, an LGBTQ identified girl in public, a $500 scholarship. So we're sitting there up on the stage with the snowmobile club and the JCs and this family's scholarship and stuff. And we got, it was kind of nervous. We went up and said, we're PFLAG, we're LGBTQ, blah, blah, blah. Here's a $500 scholarship to this girl. And you couldn't see out into the audience because it was in a stadium thing with the lights on and everything. So all you saw was black and silence. And as soon as we read her name, people started to applaud and clap, and it was great. And so I think the next year we gave away 8 scholarships, drained our treasury. That's why I think we had to start selling wreaths then, because we were broke. But anyway, no, so that's what I mean. There's always this surprise element that always turns out really positively. So.
Well, Phil, I think that if a chapter gets started here, or if it doesn't, they might contact you some way regionally to talk about how the scholarships work for you and your area, because I think.
Well, actually we stole the idea from PFLAG San Francisco. Lock, stock, and barrel stole their scholarship application, dumbed it down a little bit, and made it to our region. That was it.
I think it's
Thanks, you guys. I really enjoyed this presentation, but I have to run now. But thank you very much, and I'll watch the end of it when it gets recorded.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
really like it.
Well, as we're looking at the time, we have just a couple minutes left. I would love to hear if there's anything more you wanted to say, Rowan, about PFLAG, or if there was something you wanted to share personally, and then same for you, Phil. And then I also wanted to make sure people, if they have any questions, have a chance to ask them, because I do think everything from the scholarship to, you know, how it works, how you organize. I think sometimes in small groups, it can be really hard, but also in big groups, it can be really hard to figure out how to operate smoothly without conflict and things. So any advice at all, I'm sure we'd love to hear it.
Boy, I think it's shared goal. People seem that our group from the very first day they formed all had this one goal in mind, and that was to improve the lives of LGBTQ folks in our region. And again, you keep aligned with the mission of advocacy and education and support. And it's pretty easy to align along those ways. Keep it informal. And people come and go. That was something probably we found, that someone would come to a meeting and we kind of started to think they were a member for long term. But after 3-4 meetings, they got what they needed or whatever and didn't come back. And we have some that have kind of stayed in contact with us and help as volunteers if we need them, but they don't really need to come to monthly meetings anymore or do that. So, you know, we kind of just, like I said, we have the core group. We're always there on the second Sunday and every month, except we take a break in July and August. Summer short, and there's always someone there. So when they show up, there's always someone there. So.
Well, and maybe after your Pride event, you need a little recovery time too.
Oh man, I know how it feels. I feel for your folks too, because it takes me a day to recover from ours.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear questions from. I've pretty much talked too much. I'd like to hear if there's any questions from the folks.
Or maybe you want to continue on, and if people want to put it in the chat or think about them for a second and then ask, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd say just kind of jumping off even what Bill was saying about, right, that there's some folks who you may see for a little while and then not again, is that I feel like PFLAG is really a story of small moments that make a really big impact. For me, I was my first interaction with PFLAG was when I was like a middle schooler, because I was in Milwaukee, where I'm from, and going to my first Pride event. And at that time, there was a lot of protesters and a lot of vocal, non-support for LGBTQ folks, which is scary when you're a young person. Scary now, but especially as a young person, it was really intimidating to kind of walk up to this Pride event with all these protesters. And right beyond them was a line of PFLAG members. And they were there welcoming everyone. They were offering hugs. They were saying, "We want you to be here." And as a young person, gosh, that just impacted me so much to see an adult saying, "You're supposed to be here. We love you. Like, welcome." And that has stuck with me throughout my adulthood, through coming out numerous times. And now I'm in a situation where I'm, giving back to PFLAG through my work here. But the folks in Milwaukee who were there have no idea that they impacted me in that way. And that's really, I think, one of the cool things about PFLAG is that you do these moments of connection with people and can find out later on just how important those moments are, and know that you're making a really big impact for folks through small everyday moments.
That's interesting, Rowan, because probably my, I guess, exciting moment was we marched in the Minneapolis Pride Parade. And I think it was Red Wing, and Minneapolis was active at that time. They invited all the PFLAG chapters in Minnesota to come together and march together in Pride parade. And I never knew how loved PFLAG parents were to the LGBTQ community until you walk down the street and they found out, you know, with your PFLAG banner, people, I mean, it was like military coming home. I had two kids run out from the crowd and give me a hug just because I was a man, a dad figure walking down the street with a PFLAG sign. And so, yeah, it's there's a lot of special moments like that. And we've marched. That's another thing we've done is we've been in some parades, both like the Pride. We've been in Duluth Superior Pride. We've been in, you know, the big prides, and then we do the county fair parades as well. And we've had kids come up to us and say, "What do you do?" And it looks like you guys have fun. And you know, I'm LGBTQ, but no one knows, or my parents aren't supportive. So you just get that all the time, and it is very rewarding.
Well, I think that's such a good point, Phil. Tomorrow, we're actually having a presentation about a survey that is done for kids in Minnesota. And there was actually a surprising amount of them that said they didn't feel like they were had any value or were loved. And it is really shocking in some ways to think that we're in such a small world in this neck of the woods, and that that maybe they're loved and don't know it. But if we have some vocal voices saying that, it can really make a big difference in their lives.
Yeah, it does. It makes a big difference. Yep.
Well, we are hitting our 7:03, which means we are beyond our time. I am just so grateful for Phil and Ron for being together and sharing your information. I am certain, Phil, that you're going to get some people following up with you at least about the scholarship program and nothing else. Thankful for those people that attended tonight, and maybe you didn't have questions to ask, just wanted to listen and see how other communities and other things can be tools to support. But
I'm going to give Rowan a good commercial too, because we've had, in my tenure, we've had 3 different regional reps, and then we've had years where we've had nobody. And since they've come aboard, they've really made a difference. And so if you need support from PFLAG National and you want to get an organization going, they're here and very willing to help, very active.